Hello and welcome to another video from me, Mr. Cobalman, here at FS Pro. This video is part one of a two-part series about the Boeing 767 sim produced by VMAX and designed by Flight Factor and Step to Sky. This is a tutorial video designed to get beginners in the sky quickly and competently. Part 2 shows how to get out of the sky and back onto the ground in similar fashion. Okay, let's start with a quick look at our flight plan. I've drawn inspiration here from the PMDG 737 tutorial, so if you've flown that, you'll be right at home here. We're doing a short flight from Echo Golf Kilo Kilo, that's London Gatwick Airport in the south of the UK, to Echo Hotel Alpha Mike, Amsterdam Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands. Let's take a quick look at the charts. Here I've got the standard instrument departures for London Gatwick, and this is the Clacton 1 Zulu and 3 X-ray departure. We're going to be using the Clacton 5 Papa departure, but it's exactly the same as what we can see here, and this allows me to show you the routes we'll be taking. So we take off from runway 8 right, and that'll be on a heading of 079 degrees to the KKE 02 waypoint, whereupon we'll turn right to 091 degrees, all the way out to Kilo Kilo Echo 25. Notice along that route we're climbing up through 2, 3 and up to 5,000 feet. Turning left at that waypoint onto 014 degrees, we'll be heading towards the Detling VOR, still maintaining 5,000 feet. From the Detling VOR though, over a distance of 5 nautical miles to the waypoint Kilo Kilo November 52, we'll need to climb up to 6,000 feet. Thereafter we'll continue heading out towards Dagger at 6,000 feet, turning right on 084 degrees to the Clacton VOR, where we'll be able to start our ascent and climb up to our cruising altitude of 23,000 feet. Now our route across the English Channel is a very short one. It's just one single airway and one waypoint. We'll be flying along Uniform Lima 620 to the Redfer waypoint, Romeo Echo Delta Foxtrot Alpha. From there we'll be taking a star and a transition to land at Amsterdam's runway 18 right. Let's take a quick look at the charts. Here are the stars for Amsterdam Airport shown here. So you can see we've got stars coming in from all around the place. We're going to be flying in from the southwest, and here is the Redfer 1A star that we'll be making use of. So it comes in on course 060 to the Sulut waypoint, before heading then to our initial approach fix at Sugol, and we need to be at Sugol between flight level 70 and flight level 100. From here we're going to take one of the Sugol transitions to get us to runway 18 right here at Amsterdam. So this is the route we'll be taking then from Sugol, our initial approach fix. We'll be coming in on the Sugol 3B transition on course 112 to Echo Hotel 606. We'll make a left onto course 025 for 11 miles to Nursey, and at Nursey we'll start slowing down for our approach in to land. We'll turn right 090 degrees to Echo Hotel 607 before turning right again to our initial fix here at Echo Hotel 608, where we'll make our turn onto our approach at 183 degrees, and at this stage we'll be activating the approach mode for a full auto landing here at Amsterdam. So as we come down we'll be lowering flaps, lowering the gear, firing up all the autopilots and letting the aircraft take itself onto the ground safely to land at Amsterdam. Okay, that's the route. Let's get on board, get everything programmed up. Let's go fly. One of the challenges with this aircraft is just to get it started. So just for the purposes of this tutorial, which is just a nice, simple, straightforward beginner's guide, we're going to get rid of that problem altogether. And the way to do that is very simply to set a particular option inside of XPlane itself. So if you'd like to follow me, what I'd like you to do is do this setting, restart your sim, and then we should be ready to go. So from within XPlane, go up to the main menu system, and from here select Settings, Operations and Warnings, and with that selected, uncheck the Start Each Flight Cold and Dark option. With it unchecked, close this form down, restart XPlane, and you'll be started up on the runway, engines running, ready to go. And that takes away one of the biggest problems that you may find when you're trying to get this to work. Open up the iPad, select Airplane, open the right hand front door, select the ground section, enter in £60,000 for the fuel weight. With that done, we'll want to call for the passenger bus, the stairs and the fuel truck before pressing on the retouch load option so that we can get enough fuel on board for the flight that we're going to make. This won't take long, bit of clattering around in the background, but eventually we'll get a message saying that the plane is loaded and we are ready to go. That's it, all done. We'll get rid of the fuel truck, the passenger bus, the stairs. We'll close that door, and now we're ready to close down the iPad. That bong announces a message coming from our flight attendant.
Captain, opening the doors while engines are running is unsafe.
That flight attendant has quite a bad reputation for this aircraft, but if you follow these instructions through, that's the one and only time that we should hear from him. Okay, let's get going. We'll put our no smoking and seatbelt lights onto auto. With that done, we're ready to start programming in the FMC. First thing we'll do, take a quick look at the page. The nav data out of date shows here. We can just clear that because we don't need that. Okay, next up for our POSINIT, we're going to enter in the ref airport, which is Echo Golf Kilo Kilo as I'm flying out of Gatwick. And with that entered, I don't need to do any position or anything because that's all set for us. Over to the route, I'll copy an EGKK from the scratch pad and enter in EHAM as our destination. For the flight number, we've got up to 10 digits to enter what we like, so I'll put in FS Pro 767. With that, we'll be ready to enter our departure, so we'll select the DEP-R button, select the LSK for the departure, and then we'll enter 08 right for the runway we're taking off from and the CLN 5P SID. That's it, that's the departure entered. With that done, we can enter the route. There's only one leg to this route, nice, short and simple. So we'll take Uniform Lima 620 airway to Redfer. Recall that that's the star that we're going to be using as well, and so that's the next thing that we'll enter for our route. So that's the DEP-R button again, this time select arrival for EHAM. With that we'll next page until we find the Redf 1A star, select that, then we'll select ILS 18 right, and finally we'll want the SUG 3B transition. With that data entered, that's pretty much good to go. Quick check on the legs page, we can see everything's on there. We can activate and execute that now. Next thing, we need to do some initialization. So over to the init ref page, and we need to enter in some data here. Just click on the LSK for 0 fuel weight, it calculates the gross weight for us. I'm entering 5.0 for £5,000 for our reserve fuel. 25 for a cost index, this is an arbitrary number that I'm entering, and 230 for our cruise altitude. And with that done, we are in pretty good shape. Let's go to the takeoff page. I'm going to enter in 5 for my flaps for takeoff, 40 degrees to the thrust, and just click on the LSK for the centre of gravity so it calculates it, and our trim of 3.0. With that entered, I'm going to select the LSK for the ref speed, select on, and it's simply a matter of clicking the V1, V-rotate and V2 LSKs to get the relevant numbers, and notice our V2 is entered into our autopilot on the MCP. Okay, over to the legs page, we can see that our speeds and altitudes are showing correctly for our journey. That's what we need to see. So that's our route entered. So I'll configure the aircraft now. First thing I want to do is to enter in the trim, which should be at about 3.0. So I'm using these little devices here to adjust until I get to about the right setting for the trim. Okay, that looks good. Slight adjustment maybe. Once done, I'm going to set the flaps to 5. Quick hop over to the first officer's seat so you can see how we do that. With that done, back to the captain's seat, and I'm going to set the auto brakes to RTO, that's the rejected takeoff setting. And now up to the MCP. Our speed should be set to V2, 147 knots, which it is. I'll set the heading to the runway heading, which is 078 degrees. Next I'll set the altitude to 5,000, that's the first altitude we'll be climbing to on our climb out from takeoff. And then I'm going to set the captain's flight director switch to on, followed by the first officer's flight director switch. Next I'll arm the auto throttle, select VNav and LNav, and now back to the pedestal where I'm going to set the TCAS to TARA. With that set, I'll set the squawk to 2200 and set the map range to 10 nautical miles, which it is by default. Set the traffic button and select the data button as well. Time to put our landing lights on, position and wing lights, anti-collision, red and white lights on, and then we'll set our landing altitude to 0 for the cabin altitude controls. And that's us ready to go. So we'll set the parking brake to off, but I notice I've got an FMC message. We'll take a look at that first. I get this notification a lot. I just clear it. It seems to work okay. One day I must find out what it's about. Okay, with that done, we are good to go, so we can release the parking brake now. Bounce down on the pedestal, of course. And now it's going to be a case of moving the thrust levers forwards to about 40% N1 and then applying full toga and performing our takeoff roll and takeoff. Okay, toga selected. I'm looking out for my V-rotate speed on the left. Once there, I'll pull back gently on the stick to climb at a rate of about 2 to 3 degrees per second initially to make sure I don't strike the tail of the aircraft on takeoff. This is a long aircraft, and once I'm clear, then a steady pull to climb further, raise the gear, and once I'm 400 feet above the ground, I'll activate the autopilot. And with that done, I see I've gone past the first flap setting, so I can start retracting the flaps already. There's the wheels coming up. Fairly pronounced thump when they arrive back in the wheel wells. And we are in good shape, so I'll take up the last stage of flaps and we are clear. And we're now progressing towards our first waypoint. If I want to from here, I can use the checklist to help me to do things. So here, for example, you can see a whole row of options that are available, and if I take the after takeoff checklist, you can see we've done everything except the altimeters. And the reason we don't need the altimeters is because I have set the aircraft up for a perfect day with 0 winds, standard pressure, so we won't be changing pressures at the transition altitudes or anything. It's always going to be the same. I've done this just to make a simple flight. So that tone announces that we're within 1,000 feet then of our selected altitude, and so we start levelling off, and the engine thrust starts to reduce. And I must admit, it reduces so much. To me it does sound as if the aircraft is about to start descending again fairly rapidly. So how accurate this is with a real aircraft, I don't know. I don't recall having flown on a 767, and if I did, it was certainly a long time ago. As we go through the flight, at various points I'll adjust the heading on the MCP to match the track that we're actually flying. This is in case something should happen with that system, and then I can take over by manually dialing in the necessary information on the MCP. I'll adjust the range on the navigation display a little here, just so I can see a bit more clearly what's going on. The next thing I'm looking out for really is the Detling Vor Waypoint DET, which you can just see there at the top left of my navigation display. At that point I'm going to dial in 6,000 feet into the altitude on the MCP, because we've got 5 nautical miles to get to that required altitude for the next waypoint on our SID. As usual for a takeoff then, it's very busy for the points that we start the takeoff roll until we've cleared acceleration altitude and we're established on the climb out. After here, it all gets a great deal calmer. Okay, so you're wondering, the clouds that you can see are provided by SkyMax. This is version 3 of that particular product, and I have to say I'm quite the fan. I do like it. The ground textures you can see are provided courtesy of G2XPL, and if you want to create textures like that for yourself for free, do check out my video on how to use this great product, and to be able to create and use these yourself. Most parts of Europe, in fact anywhere in the world really, with G2XPL, wherever you want to have photorealistic scenery. So as we're flying along, a couple of things I'd point out. On the MCP, the main part of the dashboard where a lot of the autopilot settings are, you'll see... Oh! First of all though, I'm just going to make some adjustments here to the dials. The lighting is fairly dark, I find, so I've dialed up the settings here so that we can see these instruments just a bit more clearly. I'm also going to set the panel lights a bit brighter, because that will show a clearer indication for some of the settings as well. If we go back to the overhead in a minute, there you can see what I mean. They're all backlit now as well, and much clearer to identify. Back down here, so the MCP, as I was saying, if you look to the left part of that, you'll see that there are two dials, one of them showing 117.30 as the frequency and 360 as the course. You'll also see there's a button in between two dials that's currently signifying auto. This is the left hand VOR, and it's automatically tuning itself as you go throughout the flight based on what's entered into your FMC. The dial that reflects where it's tuned to is just to the left of the navigation display under the airspeed indicator. There's another set of these over on the right hand side in a completely different colour on the first officer's side. That's for VOR2. Operates in a very similar way though, but it's wholly distinct from VOR1. Where these can be challenging is you could be very easily tempted to thinking this is also where you would tune for the ILS frequencies. I've seen a couple of comments on this in the forums. Sadly, that's not the case. The place where you need to tune in the ILS frequency and course, in fact, is down on the pedestal. And you'll see me do that as part of the process for the approach and the landing at Amsterdam. So we made that left turn now. We're heading towards the Detling VOR. Once we're there, of course, we'll need to do our quick climb up to 6,000. So I'm getting ready well in advance of that and setting my track on the heading bug on the MCP. So all I need to do here is to dial up to the new altitude we need, which is 6,000 feet. There's no altitude intervention button or anything to have to push, which you may be accustomed to on the 737 NGX. Just a case of dialing in the altitude you need. The aircraft does the rest. I'm going to zoom out a little bit now on my navigation display. We're certainly well established on our climb out. We'll soon be clear of the SID as well, and a larger view of the area we're flying over may be more useful to us at this stage. As we're flying out here then, a quick comment on this this virtual cockpit that we can see in front of us here. I'm laughing to myself, which is rude really, because I'm going to make a comment about what I'm currently calling Boeing brown. If you've been on the channel a while, you'll know that I'm quite the fan of Airbus aircraft, and I rather like their subdued grey and blue colours. Boeing have got this whole sort of brown and beige thing going on. I'm sure there are really good reasons behind why these colours are chosen, but the Boeing brown, I'm not sure it really does it for me. Or maybe it's just a case of something you become accustomed to over time, or maybe it's a preference. I don't know. But it's the first thing I commented upon when I took this sim for its inaugural potter around the skies. In terms of the look and the feel inside of the cockpit itself, of course this is somewhat different. This is maybe a generation back from the current generation of aircraft, in that we're using CRTs, cathode ray tubes, for our displays here, rather than LCDs, which are used in, I believe, the more modern or more recent generation of aircraft. And dotted around these CRTs we have a number of traditional style rotary or gauge instruments, like the airspeed indicator and the altimeter, the vertical speed indicators, and so on. So it's almost as if this is one step beyond the days of, steam driven with the dials and everything else, but it's one step behind where we are today, where we have almost complete glass cockpits. The textures and everything inside of the cockpit are fairly good. I'm not quite sure they're up to the same level of quality as I saw in the JAR Designs A330. There are some things here which, and I won't go into in too much depth in this flight, but I may do in a subsequent review, where when you get a bit closer to things, the texture starts to break down a little. There are also some strange idiosyncrasies. So, for example, the labelling for the anti-collision light on the overhead, collision is misspelt. It's one of a couple of misspellings I've noticed with this aircraft, and I guess that's just the grammar nerd in me. Picks these things up. It doesn't detract from the quality of the sim. It's just a little bit jarring if you're accustomed to seeing things being so very correct all the time as they are with aircraft, and suddenly you see something quite different when you're using the simulator. The way that the knobs and dials get utilised inside this sim is, I think, vastly improved over the XPlane standard. You were now able to use the scroll wheel on our mouse, for example, for some of the rotary knobs and dials. Nice to see. I hope more manufacturers of sim aircraft for XPlane will follow the same route. If you're a fan of the PMDG 737 NGX, you'll find a lot in this aircraft that will feel familiar. Equally, there'll be quite a bit in it which might surprise you in how different it is. So, for example, the climb that we just had to do from 5,000 to 6,000 in the NGX, when you're doing that, when you dial in 6,000, you have to press an altitude intervention button for that change to take effect. Here it does it automatically. Which is better? I don't know, and which is newer? Again, I don't really know. I'm sure there's a good rationale behind all of it. If you know, please leave a comment in the notes below. I'll be delighted to learn a little bit more about this aircraft and indeed about the 737. One other difference I noted between the two at the stage where we need to change the altitude is that on the 737 I'll get an annunciation on the FMA and on the CDU to tell me that a change in altitude is required. I get it sometimes, but not always, with this 767. I don't know why it is, and I'm quite happy to accept that I may be doing something in the wrong sequence or the wrong order, or something else is missing somewhere, and that's why I'm not seeing it. This is very much an early start for me. I managed to get the thing going quite happily and using it, and this tutorial is intended only as a quick start guide for those of you who may be struggling with it more than you would like to. So if there are any hints or tips you've got on what you see in this particular flight, again, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. So we're starting our turn towards the Clacton VOR now. Now the Clacton VOR is the end of our standard instrument departure from Gatwick, and once we're there we are cleared to climb up to our cruise altitude, which, as you may recall from when I programmed the FMC, is 23,000 feet, flight level 230. I say we're cleared, of course, it's not as if ATC have cleared us, it's just that it being the end of the standard instrument departure, that's the inference that we'll take for this short video. As before, it's just going to be a case of setting 23,000 on the altimeter on the MCP. The aircraft will take care of the rest. I'm just taking a careful look when we're approaching the VOR so that I dial in the required altitude at the appropriate time. The navigation display, just at the top of it now, you can see there's a green circle followed by lettering T/C indicating the top of climb. And now, as we reach the Clacton waypoint, the VNAV and the LNAV take us onto the appropriate course and start climbing us fairly hard to 23,000 feet. If you look at the vertical speed indicator, you can see that we're climbing at a rate of 4,000 feet per minute. I dare say that'd be pretty uncomfortable for the passengers in the back. I don't know if this is allied to the cost index that I entered as part of the flight, and entering a different number would provide a more stately rate of climb, maybe around the 1,800 feet per minute, which may be more usual perhaps, but certainly this is quite sporty. As we're approaching 10,000 feet, then it's just a case of turning off the landing lights and monitoring the systems as we get up to the cruise. So at that point I'll cut this video short and say thanks very much indeed for watching. Do watch out the next couple of days for part 2, which will be the approach into and the landing at Amsterdam. Until then, I look forward to seeing you the next time. Thanks for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, as ever, a like, a subscribe or a share would be greatly appreciated. Thanks very much for watching.